Let's talk about Piero Hincapié then. Let's start with that.
Mm.
Match day one, Leverkusen lose. Not a great start to the Eric Ten Hag era at Leverkusen, and many of the issues that we chatted about. I guess like 10 days ago ish, right when we had that preview show, and I said that they have the potential to be my flop of the season. We had Sepp on last week for the transfer show, and we talked about Leverkusen's business and the significant turnover there, and we chatted about maybe a couple more players leaving. Ezequiel Palacios was one, then the Piero Hincapie, and I feel like he's been linked with a move away from Leverkusen for a long time now. He appeared to be in tears after the defeat to Hoffenheim. It wasn't on the result, but it was more of it looked like a goodbye. And since it has emerged that Arsenal and Tottenham are negotiating with Leverkusen, Leverkusen making it quite clear that they want the fee that's in this exit clause, which is 60 million euros. And that exit clause has actually gone up, right? Because the earlier it was going to be exercised, the lower. Premier League Cups came in a little late, which means that the fee is now 60 million euros. Arsenal are trying to negotiate it down, and they're trying to negotiate it in a way that they don't have to pay it this year. I'm not sure how successful that's going to be, Stefan. Maybe you've heard more than I have in that regard, but if I was Leverkusen, I'd be probably banging onto that 6 million euro exit clause. I can see them saying like it's a loan with an obligation to buy for 60 million euros, but to go down on that fee, I don't think there's going to be much luck in it. But while this is expected that Hincapie was going to leave the club, it is yet another departure, isn't it? There's been so many, and the turnover just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and then we're getting to a point now where this is a brand new club.
Yeah, we are. It's an interesting story. I think we actually discussed it a few weeks ago, and I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I did say there were a few Premier League clubs, mid-table Premier League clubs, that would be in the market for central defenders, because a lot of them have kind of moved around, and I wondered whether a Bournemouth or a Crystal Palace might be in for Hincapie. But okay, sure enough, it's Tottenham and Arsenal now, which is fair enough. He's a good player. Arsenal in for him because they've moved on Jakub Kiwior, who was their kind of central defender who could play on the left-hand side, which of course is something that Hincapie has always done at Leverkusen. I think he'd be a good fit or a good replacement for Kiwior at Arsenal. But I think there are a few things that we have to kind of go through here. It doesn't feel to me, Manuel, like this is a done deal by any means just yet. There still seems to be quite a lot that still has to be done, I think. On Arsenal's side, as you said, I think they have to kind of jump through some certain financial hoops. They've already spent a considerable amount of money. I actually checked today, they've only made 8 million euros from player sales this summer. They're one of the worst teams in Europe, in England, well, I guess then in terms of Europe as well, when it comes to selling players.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but Arsenal just do have a very good track record of drumming up sales, which obviously limits how much money they can spend, which would explain why, they're maybe trying to push for a loan deal, which would then allow them to make the payment next season. Obviously, where Leverkusen would be happy with that or not remains to be seen.
Yeah.
And then on the Leverkusen point of view, I don't think they were planning to sell this many players, but I don't think they'd be entirely surprised at the players that have been kind of looking to move on. Hincapie, to be fair, is a player that's been linked with departure from Leverkusen more or less since the day he arrived at Leverkusen, because he's just one of those players with a certain profile that he's almost like, I kind of want to say he's like a football manager player, in a sense. He's just one of these perennially young, gifted, highly touted players that everyone buys on Football Manager, everyone buys on FIFA. And so he's got this reputation that every transfer window is as if it's a given that he'd leave Leverkusen. But I think it's interesting that he hasn't. I think on his day he's a very good player. He's a very solid technical player, very good with the ball at his feet, very good at one-on-one situations. And what Arsenal will be looking for is a player that can play centre back or left side of a centre back in a back three, or even as a full back. And Hincapie could do that. He's great with the ball at his feet, great passing, can run with it as well. I would say he really has the physical presence to be a top-class central defender, to be honest with you. I think he
Mm-hmm.
lacks the height. In many ways, he kind of reminds me about a wee bit of Lisandro Martinez at Manchester United. He's a very, solid player, very solid central defender, but maybe lacks just the sheer physicality to thrive at a top level. And there's also some sort of question marks over his fitness and his injuries and stuff, because I think while he has been a very good player for Leverkusen, it feels to me like Manu that they've never actually been able to rely on him enough to build that defence around him, which is why laterally they've ended up having to build it around guys like Tapsoba, Jonathan Tah, season before last, Kosunu obviously played a big part. Hincapie has always kind of been a bit part player in that team because maybe of injuries or games he's missed out on. So, I think Leverkusen have their price. As you said, there's a release clause there. I think they'll demand that release clause in one form or another. And if Arsenal are willing to meet it, then they'll be very happy to just kind of shake Hincapie's hand and wish him all the best and get on with things. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But the exodus continues, man. And
Yeah,
I think that's quite interesting, isn't it?
He did play a lot last year. He benched 30. He played. He started 32 out of 34 Bundesliga. 31 out of 34 Bundesliga games, and only missed 2 games because of a yellow card suspension. And he was on the bench once. So last season he did play a lot, and a lot of minutes as well. It is really the years before where he always came on and off. But I remember before last year he was also linked with a move away from the club.
I think if you look at his minutes in the Bundesliga, so you're absolutely right. Last season he did play a lot of football, but season before he played about half the total minutes. Season
Missed
before
a lot
that,
of games. Mm-hmm.
Season before that, again played a full amount. But in the season before, so for anyone who's trying to keep up, last season he played a full season. Season before, half a season. 22-23 full season, and in the season before that, so 21-22, more or less half a season again. I completely agree with you. He obviously does get a lot of minutes. He doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't really strike me as a player. I mean, he has obviously last season, but that was probably a bit of a rarity, to be honest, in terms of his career at Leverkusen.
Trying to think too, weren't there injury concerns as well last year with Leverkusen?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. It's a hard one to actually quantify because obviously, as you said, he doesn't have any technical injuries that stand out. So I don't want to kind of scare Arsenal fans by any means, but a lot of games where he's kind of coming on in matches, obviously, because he can play as a kind of a left back and a centre half, which explains why the season before last, so the title winning season, yes, he played 26 games in that league campaign.
Mm-hmm.
But he came off the bench in 10 of those games. He's only really started 16, I think, of the, how many league games are now? 32 or 33?
34. Yeah.
34, sorry. Yeah, that's the impression I've been getting from him. And that's why I do kind of wonder, why he's never really been, I guess last season he did, but I don't know. I don't think he'd be a tremendous loss for him. I think he's a player that Leverkusen have always expected to sell at some point, so... Yeah, we'll see what happens.
I think the real issue is that it is just another body going out, right? And then you're getting to the point now where this is a completely new team, and such a drastic turnover, and it doesn't look good either because so much of it is a new head coach comes in who's under close observation because of his past. Especially at Man United, right, where a lot of the blame was put on him. And so, to now having to deal with this massive turnover, another defender is going out, you'll have to bring in a new one. There's a lot of talk that Alex Garcia could also leave now, right, and then be replaced by Quentin Timmer from PSV. And that also is one thing that Erik Ten Hag has been criticized, that the Dutchification of any club that he's been at, right? That teams become increasingly Netherlands. whenever he's at a certain club. And it's just really hard then to put all these different new voices into a dressing room and build squad chemistry. Yeah, it just feels like a lot at the moment, Stefan.